Welcome back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad that you're joining us again this week for our shows. We're always glad that there are people like you out there that are interested in the issues that are happening in the cities in Northwest Community Television's viewing area. It's important for good government to have citizens who follow what's going on and then share their ideas back and forth with their mayors and city council people. So we're glad that you're interested. If you haven't watched our show before, each week we're going to have someone on from one of the 9 cities in our viewing area talking about the issues that are happening in that city so you can be more current and up to date about what's happening. And from time to time we'll bring in some other groups that affect all of our cities. Now, tonight we're very happy to welcome Mayor Mark Steffenson from Maple Grove.
Thank you.
We're going to learn about what's happening in Maple Grove and update people on what that is. But you've been on my show many times before, so I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself to our wider audience.
Sure. I'm Mark Steffenson. I've been the mayor of Maple Grove for about 14 years now. I was on the city council for about 4 years before I became the mayor. And so I've been on the council for about 18 years at this point. So I've seen a lot of changes in Maple Grove.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of the development happen, and so far it's been very enjoyable to be involved with all those different processes that involve the city, and certainly hope to continue to see significant growth and development in our city over the next 4 years.
Yeah, you've seen it change probably as much as anybody else in our whole area.
Yeah, we've gone from what would be a farming community to a suburban to almost an urban type of center.
Right. And then I had asked you, because I'm asking everybody to get a little touch of early history. How old is Maple Grove?
Well, the city is about 40 years old, maybe a little bit older, 45 years old. Obviously, it goes back in history a lot longer than that.
Right.
Pierre Bottineau was in theory, our first resident out in this way, and we have preserved his old house out at the Elm Creek Park Reserve. But certainly, we as a city have been around for in that 40, 45 year range, and have been growing ever since, you could say.
So it started from a from a group of rural farming people?
Yes, Maple Grove historically has been a farming community.
Okay.
And you go back over time, that's where they were really a township that existed outside of Osseo. Osseo was the big metropolis out this way for years and years, and Maple Grove was just sort of a township or a group of farms that were located out sort of south and west of Osseo.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of changes in all of our cities, some of them going back farther and some of them more current.
Yeah, the real big significant growth in Maple Grove way back when was really sort of as a lake cabin community around Eagle Lake.
Okay.
And that really goes back into the early 1900s.
Sure.
And those are where really the first sort of cabins were built in Maple Grove, but that's 100 years ago. Right,
a long time back. And now we'll talk on an issue that maybe we'll be done with it after a little bit, is progress on the 610 completion. Because I know all the time that you've been on our show, we've been talking about what's happening, how it can move forward. But can you give us an update on what is happening?
Sure. The phase to connect into 94 is now actually underway.
Okay.
And so in the springtime, you'll see significant activity out there. The freeway from approximately Elm Creek Boulevard to I-94 will be completed.
Okay.
There'll be a connection that will allow you to go north on the freeway, to I-94, and then as you come south on I-94, you can connect and go east on 610. There still is not the actual full interchange at the freeway that will be completed as a part of this funding, and so we have to get about $45 million more for that completion. But the significant new connection is a very, very important connection.
Oh, definitely.
And it means that we'll see a freeway completed in the fall of 2016.
And basically what it needs to finish it off is to get the funding, right?
Right. Yeah. We have some additional funding to get some of the actual legs completed, but the reality is that the new funding is significant funding, and we're happy that it lasts after...
how many years?
Well, The first federal funding for 610 was in 1991.
Oh, my goodness.
The first time that Highway 610 showed up on a map that relates to the Metropolitan Area Plan was 1948.
Wow.
So, and I know that in Maple Grove, the best measure I have is that in the early 1970s, there was an elementary school that was built just on the north side of where 610 was going to come through the corridor, because we had saved the corridor, because the school district knew that 610, and they were told 610 was coming shortly, and they wanted to have the elementary school in place so the kids didn't have to cross the freeway when the freeway opened up, and that was the early 70s. So, you know, it's ridiculous, but it's taken that long.
Right. And it has development towards the north and the west has taken much longer than going south of the cities.
It has, and you know, I've talked historically about what I see as the disparity of funding for projects between the north and the south and other parts of this city.
And so this will have a significant effect then on business development and commercial development.
It really will. I mean, you're seeing the huge new developments that are happening in Brooklyn Park along the completed portions of 610. You're going to see significant new developments in a similar fashion along 610 in Maple Grove.
Yeah, so you're looking to a spurt of...
We will see a spurt along Highway 610, there's no doubt. And, you know, we're looking forward to that. And, you know, we're already seeing some of that developing.
Now, you'll be involved in going with a group lobbying for this, because it has... Where does the money come from? We'll back up just a little bit.
The money historically has come from some federal appropriations and some state appropriations, and then local governments have had to make their contribution as well. And so we will be continuing to do some lobbying both at the state level and at the federal level. So this spring, myself and Mayor Lundy from Brooklyn Park will be going out to Washington, D.C. again to talk to our federal representatives to see if we can't secure or help secure some additional funding for 610 to get that actually completed the way it was designed and the way it's intended to be completed.
Yeah, you've been out there many times.
I've been out there. I bet you I've been to D.C. over the years 15, 20 times simply on 610.
Right. Yeah, you're probably an expert on the subject of lobbying for that need.
Well, I think they know when they see me what I'm coming for.
They recognize
They recognize me and they know why I'm showing up. Yes, they do.
Something that's currently happening with roads is that there's that addition of that third lane between, let's see, where 494 and 694 go together.
Right.
And then 94 takes off. From there, going back to Highway 55?
Highway 55 on 494, there is the third lane that is going to actually be worked on this summer. A little work was done last fall, but a main part of the work will be done this summer. And that's exciting for us because, you know, if you have to commute through that corridor either in the morning or night, you know how bad the commute is. And so, you know, I know every morning when I go to work, the freeway is stopped right there in front of my office. And so, you know, at last we'll see a third lane, and that should really help really the commuters, but also the residents who live in our communities, because whether it's Maple Grove or Brooklyn Park or New Hope or other cities along that portion, you know, a lot of traffic actually gets off the freeway or doesn't get on, or doesn't even get on the freeway because they know the freeway is backed up. So they travel local roads and cause wear and tear there, but also cause traffic issues and all sorts of other problems. So it'll be wonderful when the third lane gets opened here in a little over a year.
And then it took a little bit of lobbying on people's part to get it to be a permanent lane. Maybe you can talk a little bit
it took a little bit of arm twisting, you could say, and I have to thank Representative Earhart, who was from Edina, who was actually in charge of the House Transportation Committee. He was very active in helping support this. The mayor of Plymouth, Mayor Slavic, was very active in trying to push this forward, because the plan through MnDOT and the Met Council was to add a shoulder lane, which, quite frankly, wasn't going to solve the problem, was but a short-term Band-Aid fix that really didn't solve anything, and in my view, actually probably caused more problems than it helped. I mean, I think the way the shoulder lane was designed was going to be extremely dangerous. I thought, and I expressed that to people because I thought, you know, we had seen something like this historically up on I-94 between Maple Grove and Rogers. And over a period of years, several years ago, there was about 21 deaths over a 3-year period of time on the freeway there. And we had talked to MnDOT about that at that point in time, and they finally put in those cables.
Oh, right.
That was the first place in the state that they put in the cables, and the cable system worked really well. But I think that this is another good example where, working together with some other local community leaders and some of the representatives, we were able to convince people that the third lane needs to be funded and done now.
Okay, and there's certainly issues where several cities need to work together, right?
Right. I mean, this is a classic example of how when cities work together for a common purpose, we can oftentimes really accomplish things that are very important to our residents.
Yeah, so cities do a lot of things on their own, but there's still a lot of room for collaboration.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, that project is paid through
MnDOT found various funds to use for that project, so that project is fully funded, it will be fully completed, and it's really a combination of lower costs on some projects than what they had anticipated, and the readjustment of some additional costs from other projects, so they could do this project right away.
And it did get kind of moved ahead from where it had been planned at one point, right?
Yes, it was moved ahead. Really, the third lane was not something that was planned for a long time.
And then, if I remember right, that was the only section of the 494, 694 that didn't have 3 lanes, right?
Yeah, I don't know about the far east side of town, but certainly on the south and west parts of town, that was the only section that doesn't have 3 lanes. And historically, if you go back 10, 15 years when they were redoing 494, the promise was essentially we're going to start in the south, work our way around to the west, and then work our way up north to Plymouth and Maple Grove, and we'll add the third lane the whole way. And of course, they made it around the south, and they made it around the southwest up to 394, and then they didn't make it any farther north. And I guess it goes back to my historical complaint about us not getting what I think we should be getting up here for our road development.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done a lot of lobbying and talking to people to bring this issue out.
Yes, so we've talked about it a lot, and I think that when you see the development as it occurs down in Eden Prairie or Minnetonka or other communities, I think it was only fair that they complete what they promised to us 15 years ago, which was the full third lane.
And then the timeline for the completion of that third lane is?
I believe that the completion of that third lane will be this upcoming fall of 2015. It might actually be 2016, but I think that the hope is 2015.
The Metropolitan Council, this is just from reading in the paper, is they've got a whole Thrive, I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember the name?
I think it's Thrive 2030.
Thrive 2030. And then part of that is they're setting goals for affordable housing for different areas. And there's a little controversy about that, in particularly with Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and Richfield, as I believe. And so I thought, well, maybe we could find out what's happening in the different cities. So what is the target for affordable housing for Maple Grove, approximately?
I think that the number over the expansive sort of 2030 time period was around 1,700 units, if I recall right. And I'm not sure if those were actually designated as affordable housing units or high-density units. But certainly they have a goal that they've set out as affordable. I know that Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center and Richfield are very upset about those numbers because they believe they already had significant affordable housing in their communities, and really a good example is Brooklyn Park. They've really struggled over the last few years to try and sort of eliminate some of those massive housing projects that existed historically there that really caused them some issues.
Oh, definitely. Lots of big problems. How much affordable housing is there in the city of Maple Grove? Well, if you're going to look at it percentage-wise.
I'm not sure what the percentage is because it sort of differentiates from year to year. I think that really this year probably the number will be, for example, on a home would be a home that would be probably around $170,000, $180,000 home. What they do is they base it on a calculation of the size of your family, percentage of the median income. I think it's usually 60% of the median income. So that's, I think the median income in the metropolitan area is around $60,000. So that's what they base it on, and then you go forward from there.
Affordable to the average person then, right?
Right. Well, so what they do is they say average median income is, let's say it's $60,000. We're going to say that affordable housing constitutes someone who makes 60% or less of that $60,000 for a family of four. So that it's, if you make $36,000 or less a year and you have a family of four, you sort of qualify for that sort of affordable housing, or that's the dollars that are involved.
Right. And that's the group that the Met Council is looking to provide more of.
And then they do a calculation on what you could afford for housing, and that sort of then determines a house that you can buy for that amount of money or rent for that amount of money constitutes affordable housing.
So what is Maple Grove doing in that area, or?
I think that we've been sort of actively involved over the last few years with a series of developers who have provided, significant new affordable housing in the community. One just opened last summer. And, we also have historically purchased a series of homes and refurbished them ourselves. And we rent them out in the city. It's what's called our scattered site housing program. And then the county has a similar scattered site housing program. And then we've also worked together with a local community group to try and help fund sort of, one of the real aspects of affordable housing is the land costs. And so there's a land community trust fund that we've worked with to provide some write-downs in land costs for certain properties that allows a family then to purchase that house or live in that house. So those are the main things we've done.
And if you go back in time, the stress on that kind of housing was in large big developments, right? If you go back to, what, the 60s or 70s?
Right. I mean, I think that you look historically, communities have developed in a fashion, and, at times affordable housing has been difficult to obtain because of the cost of land. I mean, I know that if you really go back about 20 years, 15 years in Maple Grove, land costs were so high and development costs are so high that it was very hard to find developers that were willing to build and stay within that affordable range because they couldn't afford to do it. And so, the reality is that if you're going to, really promote affordable housing, you have to be able to have a governmental mechanism to provide for funding for that source of housing, because it's not going to happen all that easily in the open market because of the cost of land.
Well, yeah, and people say to cities, why don't you do this or why don't you do that in terms of development or building, but you can only do what somebody's willing to come in and do.
Right, and the reality is we don't have the financial wherewithal to do some of these types of projects. The money, over the last 5-10 years, especially for cities, I mean, finances have been difficult. I mean, a city like Maple Grove doesn't receive any local government aid. So whatever we have to budget accordingly because we know we're not receiving any money from the state. So when you hear about local government aid, Maple Grove receives zero. And so we're not going to receive local government aid. And so, really our tax dollars have to go to running our city itself.
Now, what factors do you think cities need to consider when they're setting targets for things like affordable housing?
I think that a good example is you can work with developers and get them to do certain types of aspects for their projects, or sometimes include percentages of affordable units in a project that you can do. But I think that you have to really look at what your city can afford to do, how your city's already been developed. I mean, a city like Brooklyn Center or Richfield or Brooklyn Park, I think, has to be looking to their long-term tax base and what realistically should go in their community versus other communities might be different. And so, it isn't a one-size-fits-all type project. I think it really has to be designed by cities who are really best able to respond to the local government or the local community needs.
Yeah, because there's kind of always a rub with the Metropolitan Council, and its importance in helping the whole area develop, plus the individual cities. And
well, I mean, I think that the Metropolitan Council has some things that they've done over the recent years that I would disagree with.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I've expressed my concerns historically over, for instance, their transit plan.
Yeah, we
you
talked
know,
about that earlier.
Well,
right,
where
right.
really, when you look at the northwest suburbs, they don't have a good transit plan for us. I mean, Plymouth, Maple Grove, some of the neighboring outlying communities,
Right.
there is no plan on their map for transit for us.
Right,
So,
right.
you know, I know that we have opt-out systems, but,
Right.
you know, I don't understand why the opt-out systems
Yeah.
don't show up on how the system is going to function
In
overall.
the overall, right.
Right, and it should, and, you know, they don't do that. And so, you know, a good example is the light rail that we talked about
Right.
privately before, about, you know, going to Botna Boulevard, and where does that really
Right.
develop over the years? They should have a
Right.
long-term plan that shows that this light rail is going to, for instance, maybe go to Rogers.
Right.
At the same railroad tracks that
Yeah.
are already there. And there's certain plans like that that I think they could have a better vision for. I know that their vision really is to see increased higher densities in the
definitely.
inner urban core, and that doesn't correspond to what we as the outlying suburbs
Right,
need
right.
or need to hear from them.
And then I asked you to think a little bit about what are some of the opportunities for youth in Maple Grove? You hear some more of that sometimes with some of the other cities, but the bigger ones not as much. So I thought, let's talk about that a little bit, about what are the opportunities for youth in your city?
I mean, I think there's a wide variety of opportunities. I mean, certainly we have a number of very, very active community athletic organizations. So,
Right.
you know, if there's an interest in sports, generally the youth can find not only the school, but a community organization that will be involved in that sport,
right.
whether it's soccer, lacrosse, football, baseball, you know,
Probably
basketball.
more so in a larger community like yours.
Right, and there's very active organizations that are involved in that, and so, you know, that's great for your children if you want to be involved in sports. But we also have a very active theater community, an active music community. So, you know, a good example is we have a couple different sort of groups now that put on their own types of plays.
Oh, right, right.
And different locations, and so there's the availability of you to be involved in that. Certainly there are a lot of other organizations that you can be involved with throughout the community for your child or a youth. So, I mean, I think that it's important that children are involved in activities outside of school.
Right, yeah, it is important. And then your Park and Recreation Department have a whole series of things, right?
Absolutely. We have, you know, huge sets of programs that run all year round. It isn't just the summertime, although the summer is bigger than the winter, winter and fall, but certainly all year round we have a huge group of programs that people can see through our, you know, quarterly brochures that we send out, but also, you know, through our website that has the whole list of different activities that are available to them.
And people looking for that kind of thing can probably go on your city website.
It's the best location to find
Yeah.
that. It really is. There's a clear direction on how to get to the different sites and different locations within the sites and really find out what is available.
It's because of the time of year, most of the cities are taking, at this time of year, are adding people to their commissions. And we're
Yes.
always telling people to get involved as volunteers. So maybe you could mention the commissions that Maple Grove has.
Well, we have a planning commission, a
Okay.
lake quality commission. We have an arbor committee. We have what's called the CAC committee, which is sort of a long-range planning
Okay.
committee. And that's really the main committees that we
Okay.
have in the city.
So if somebody's interested, or, because like I said, we keep telling our audience out there, get involved, be part of your city. What's the procedure for A, finding more about these commissions and what they do, or B, applying?
Well, I think that, again, probably the easiest way today is to go to our
Okay.
website.
Okay,
The information is contained on our website about our different commissions, about what positions are open, and then how you go about getting an application to provide to the city to try and become a part of that or fill that position on the commissions.
now are any of your commissions televised?
None of them
cable?
are, except
Okay.
for the Planning Commission.
Okay,
I believe
'cause
Planning
I was
Commission is
thinking a lot of the
televised.
cities have switched to Planning Commission being televised now, right?
Right, right.
So, but if they went on your website, they could find out when the meeting is.
They can find out when the meeting is, where it's located, and certainly, as we talked about before, they're all open
Right,
meetings, so
right.
they can all come and participate and listen, and if they have questions, ask them, or, we can't encourage people enough to get involved.
Oh, right, right. So that's what I was thinking, for people to know and realize this is the time of year when most of the openings are filled, right?
Yes, yes.
So it would be the perfect time for them
Yeah,
to.
if you're going to do it, you need to do it
Right,
very quickly,
right.
because
Don't
don't dally,
dally.
because otherwise you'll be too late.
Right, right. But that people can take the time to actually go to those meetings and find out what is really happening.
Right, and I think it's important, for people to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly, and if you don't want to be involved in that, certainly there's the Maple Grove Community Organization
right,
that runs,
right.
For instance, our summer activities and our summer parade and our summer celebration. But there's other organizations within the community, where there's the Lions,
Oh, right,
Rotary.
right.
There's a whole group of organizations that exist out there that, if you don't want to go to a city council meeting or a planning commission meeting, go to one of those meetings and get involved in those, community organizations that really provide a lot of support for our community.
Oh, definitely. And that there are opportunities for volunteers to do things on an ongoing basis, like a commission, because that's going to be once a month for a couple of years.
Right.
But there's also shorter term opportunities for people.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of different opportunities. For example, a one-day event
Right.
coming up in the springtime here is our annual planting of flowers.
Ah.
The Maple Grove, we have a history of having our boulevards planted
Oh,
with
right.
flowers.
Yes, and they are attractive.
And they're beautiful.
They are
But what we
attractive.
do is we have a huge group of volunteers every year who, on a certain Saturday in May, go out and plant all those flowers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so,
I've enjoyed your flowers when I drive out your area.
and so, that is a wonderful opportunity if you just want
right.
to, if you like gardening and you just
Right.
want to take a single morning.
Right.
It doesn't take very long. You've done something that's helpful for us as a community.
And then you have different volunteer opportunities within the city where people help, like go with the police reserve or.
Right. We have a police reserve. Certainly we have Cross, which is the food shelf, but through
Right.
Cross they also deliver a lot of meals to people who otherwise wouldn't have the ability
Right.
to get those meals.
Right.
Meals on Wheels type program. So, there's a lot of different opportunities, and if you're involved in your church or a church community out
Right.
here, those church communities always have a lot of volunteer
Oh,
opportunities
definitely.
as well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for
Thank you.
taking time and helping our audience learn more about what's happening in Maple Grove. And take the time, if any of the things that we talked about tonight resonated with you, take the time to contact
Sure.
Mayor Steffenson, because we put his email and phone number up,
Yes.
or your city councils and your mayors too, if it's a different city. We're glad you've been with us, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Bye.